Currently, it's clear that times are uncertain, times aren't favourable in any markets currently, except for gold. The most recent news coming up this week is around Trump and his new reciprocal tariffs that are causing havoc on the market.
Are you thinking like the market's going to have a bit of a dip once those tariffs are actually in place?
There was definitely a possibility that
if you're having one of the biggest asset managers, the CEO, saying that the US dollar is at risk, like that's massive.
you can't ignore that. So I think it's one of the biggest comments made about Bitcoin in recent history.
What do you think is the time horizon we have before we see a peak?
My personal strategy is to...
Do you think that there's going to be a new inflow in investors?
I think
What actual assets or digital assets you're looking at?
since we've had such a big pullback, there's a lot of really established coins that definitely see being a 10x. One of those is actually...
Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Proof of Success podcast. We have a special guest today and we have Ben back from Vietnam. How are you going today?
Very good. Thank you, Kane. Hello, everyone watching. Yeah, I got back from Vietnam 2 days ago. I was there for 3 weeks, traveling with the partner. It was an amazing time. First time actually overseas. So it was a bit outside my comfort zone, but we experienced a lot. Started north of Vietnam, traveled all the way down south, and it was a great time, but I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, awesome. Got a bit of a break from the crypto market, which is good because I think it was a bit of a stressful time for a lot of people in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's true. I did make a point of it, like actually stepping back for 3 weeks and actually logging off, because you don't realize how much time you actually spend in the space. It's an everyday thing, 8-9 hours a day. So to step back and just to, have a bit of reflection and spend quality time away from work was super nice. And came back with new ideas for the space.
Yeah, awesome. Did you notice anything in particular that from an outsider perspective around what's going on?
Yeah, I did. I can see that we do hyper analyze it every single day. And perhaps in a time where risk was on and the markets were moving, I probably would have missed out a lot and, missed trades. But since the market is, stagnant at the moment, as times are very uncertain, I didn't miss too much. And if anything, it gave me a clearer picture of what's going on. And I was able to, simplify it, as in I know the way the market's heading, but I can just see that and just simplify that within like one sentence, like conditions aren't great. We need a bit more time. We can be patient. And in, 2 or 3 months, come out the other end and things might be positive.
Yeah, I think you make a good point around the over-analyzing. We obviously spend so much time in the, looking at different projects and looking for different opportunities in the market. And sometimes we can overlook things as well when we're going too deep into the rabbit hole. So, it's awesome that you've had a good experience. I think, was it your first trip overseas as well?
It was, yep.
Yeah, so awesome.
Straight into the capital of Vietnam, Hanoi. So I was in the deep end, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's get into our discussion today. Just a bit about the current landscape of the crypto market, where the market is currently and where we could kind of see it going in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, so currently it's clear that times are uncertain, times aren't favorable for any markets currently except for gold. We've seen gold making new all-time highs this week, but maybe we can talk about gold a bit later. We're just focusing on crypto for now. I won't get ahead of myself, but there's a lot going on. I think the most recent news coming up this week is around Trump and his new reciprocal tariffs that are causing havoc on the market.
Yeah, I mean, they've been causing so much like uncertainty in the last couple of months. And especially this week, because like this was a week that a lot of them were actually going to be switched on and like become active. So a lot of people in the market have just like become even more fearful because they're not sure how the market's going to react and how that's actually going to affect our macro economy. And then, with that and the macro conditions as being unfavorable, as you said, yeah, it just doesn't look like a very good time to be in risk on assets. And I think that's why, as you said, with gold, it's been on a little bullish run.
Correct. Yeah, it's I think on April 2nd in the US, April 3rd here in Australia, those reciprocal tariffs kick in. And a lot of the price can be reflected in investors pricing in these announcements and pricing in the bad news. Therefore, we're kind of smothered down here around 80K. And investors don't know which way it's going to go. So we haven't seen much action. March was spent between 95 and 75K, pretty much is in a sideways trend. A few high and low volatility increases. But I think April 2nd and 3rd will be another time of volatility. So up to 25 countries are going to be affected on this day. And so there's a lot to play out. And I think investors are fearing for the worst.
And what do you think? Are you thinking like the market's going to have a bit of a dip once those tariffs are actually in place? Or do you think it's a oversold kind of position at the moment?
I don't think it's oversold. There was definitely a possibility that these countries could make deals with America before the deadline. And then I think that could have been a bottom signal, but it's getting too close to the date, and there's likely that not many deals will be made because at the end of the day, it's a negotiation tactic from Trump, majority of these tariffs. But looking like a lot of these will get implemented, and that will cause like another short-term sell-off. I'm not sure how severe.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you just got to prepare for the worst, and we know how quick things can change.
Yeah, that's true. And I think all it takes is for like one post by Trump on social media saying a lot of deals have been put in place and we're very happy as a country. And then all of a sudden the pendulum will swing and then the risk on could come back on very quickly.
Yeah, awesome. So let's move aside from that for now. Tariffs have been talked about quite a bit on our podcast, but it's obviously such a big thing in our space and something that's affecting the market quite dramatically at the moment. We saw one of the analysts at BlackRock have a bit of a discussion around Bitcoin and the actual price of Bitcoin in terms of institutional interest as well, and how it actually might be a good buying opportunity.
Yep, he put forward, it's a quote that he reckons currently is a irrational short-term sell-off, and a lot of sophisticated Bitcoin holders are pretty much licking their lips right now, the opportunity to accumulate down here in the high 70s.
Yeah, and this is the thing is like you have BlackRock, you have some of the biggest asset managers in the world, and you even have the US now speaking about looking at ways of accumulating Bitcoin. And we still see like a lack of price appreciation, which is, in my eyes, that's the big validation for us to know that at these prices, Bitcoin should be an attractive buy. So it's really interesting that the price is still in these ranges, probably due to just, as we've said, the macro uncertainty, but those big institutions with the money, they're looking to buy.
Correct. And we were looking at the heat maps yesterday for Bitcoin. And in terms of the buying opportunity right now, I think Bitcoin's currently 80K. In terms of the heat maps, the downside wasn't too bad looking at those charts. We saw a massive buy wall at 75K, and a lot of top analysts are calling for that 70K to be a bottom, which is another sell line there. I don't think 70K actually can get hit unless we see some terrible news about these tariffs or geopolitical. I think a lot of the times when the mass are calling for a prediction, it seems to get front run. So I do see 75K being a viable dip. And I do think, these sophisticated investors like BlackRock said, we'll be buying heavily there.
Yeah. And the other thing they did mention was that there's a lot of big organizations and companies that are going to be looking at accumulating Bitcoin or introducing it to their own strategies. So I think they were saying that the interest is there, but it might take a little bit of time to implement into their treasuries. So I feel like, it's a situation where in the next few months or 6 months, we'll see a few bigger companies and organizations outside of the likes of MicroStrategy and, the other big ones that are actually going to start to accumulate Bitcoin. And then it's at that point, I feel like it's almost too late for this cycle for a lot of people.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And then what happens when it's a set supply of 21 million and everybody wants to get in at the late stage? that's when the supply shock really kicks in.
All right. Well, that being said, what do you think is the time horizon we have before we see a peak?
Okay, I might talk a bit of my personal strategy and outlook here. I do think in the next 3 months, what we have coming up is hopefully certainty around tariffs. We have potential 1 to 2 rate cuts late into June. So I do think we can get a bounce across the board. And I think Bitcoin can reach back over 100K. I'm not going to be reaching for the stars. I think realistically about 110. So back to the previous all-time high. And what that means for altcoins as well is a possible 2 to 3x across the board. So my personal strategy is to hopefully get a relief bounce over the next 3 months. That's altcoins 3x, and then actually rotate a lot of it into Bitcoin, as I think we see a bit more sideways until Q4 at the end of the year.
I think that aligns with a lot of people's like thoughts on how Bitcoin can perform in the next few months. In my opinion, yeah, we're probably going to see a sideline consolidation for a couple months before we get a bit of certainty around the macro conditions, like the rate cuts, as we said. And by then, hopefully, we start to see a bit of a resurgence in Bitcoin's price. So in my opinion, the downside is a lot more limited to what upside we could see. And Bitcoin's price right now probably offers a really good opportunity, like BlackRock and that BlackRock analyst said. I'm pretty in touch with what his thoughts are. But yeah, I think that altcoins are another whole discussion at this point because they just haven't been performing very well. It's going to be interesting to see if they actually start to have an uptick and Bitcoin dominance starts to have a decline. But I think that's all a matter of how Bitcoin performs in the next 3 to 6 months. Okay, so I want to kind of touch on one of the more interesting things we've seen recently. I think a lot of different analysts are actually talking about it, which is a correlation between Bitcoin and the M2 money supply. I think that, we've seen a kind of very strong correlation to previous cycles and how the M2 money supply actually can correlate to the performance of Bitcoin. And I just thought I'd pick your brain about it because I know that you've looked pretty deeply into it. And yeah, maybe explain what M2 money supply is first for the viewers and then kind of talk about what correlation you're seeing.
So basically, global M2 is the amount of readily available cash in the world. And so, Kane, what have you been seeing with this Bitcoin versus M2 correlation?
So we saw a chart recently. I was looking at Colin's Talks chart, and it was basically correlating Bitcoin, and it was about 108-day lag. And when you would kind of put them together, you could see that, these two charts actually looked very, very similar. So a lot of people were saying that, if you lag the M2 global supply and correlate it to Bitcoin, there starts to see like quite a significant trend where it's like they have the same chart basically.
Yeah. So we'll have it on the screen right now so people at home will understand.
Yeah, exactly. Saying. And the one thing that was really interesting about this one was that about 80% of the time was actually perfectly correlating to the market peaks and market lows, which is like very, very good. If anyone knows investing, if you're right 80% of the time, it is very good in any market. So this is one that a lot of analysts are looking at because they want to see if they can actually predict maybe another peak in the market or maybe an exit point as well. So it's a really interesting one that we're looking at.
It would. I actually slightly disagree in terms of a lot of analysts are speaking about it. I actually think it's undercovered currently. I think a couple of the top analysts in the space have mentioned it, but I believe maybe because a lot of people are, just taking a backward step as we're currently down. But I think this correlation has actually been under talked about.
All right. Well, if that's true, then maybe a lot of people actually are overlooking it, and we've got an opportunity here that a lot of people don't see. And we've obviously seen that global M2 has actually upticked in the recent months, especially this month in particular, back in February. So I was just wanting to know your prediction. Do you think Bitcoin might start to see a resurgence? Because if we use that 108-day lag effect, I know a few different people were saying 70 days, 80 days. There's obviously for interpretation. Do you think we might see Bitcoin start to surge like the M2 has?
I do. I think the longer the days, the higher probability. An 80% chance just over 100 days is an incredible rate, especially in investing. So I think that 100 days correlates to about the end of May. And I really do think that could align with Bitcoin touching over 100K. I don't think we're going to go much higher than that. I really do think it's a good indicator and can come true.
That's the thing. Like May, I keep hearing May. A lot of analysts are saying May is such a good time to, for Bitcoin. It will be a really strong month for Bitcoin. I think it lines up with like the chances of a rate cut in June, like we did touch on. I think it was predicted around 50% chance on Polymarkets that there would be a rate cut, and that would be the first one of 2025, which would be pretty important for us because obviously we've had quite high rates in the last couple of years, and a lot of people were predicting they would have one a lot sooner than July. So if that's the case, if we see the odds or chances of a rate cut coming in July, then maybe that even makes May a more favorable month for Bitcoin as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have said that May could be the top, which I think's a bit ridiculous. And if it is the top, we're not going to be that much higher than we are right now. And you can nearly put it down as one of the worst bull markets we've ever had.
It's true. I mean, I think a lot of people did say May was the top, especially in 2024, because I think we were just in that a lot more bullish mindset at that time. We had the ETFs and we still had the Bitcoin strategic reserve that a lot of people were still predicting, and they were thinking that, once that's going to be announced, there'll be mass buying by the government, mass buying by institutions and companies and stuff. And that's why May would be the peak. And I think that since that got a bit lagged out and that wasn't, brought into play as early as a lot of people thought, that, that's become a bit of a disappointment for a lot of people, especially that the US government haven't actually bought any like extra Bitcoin. So it looks like that a lot of people are readjusting their predictions.
Yeah, I think people definitely underestimated, the effect Trump would have this early on in his term. But I saw a lot of the predictions for the top in May came about in February, came about when the market did downturn. People thought we were going to see a rally into May. So it has been pretty recent. But I definitely think it's not going to be the case. And and later in the year is when all hopefully market conditions improve.
All right. So if it's later in the year that the market's going to improve, so let's say Q2, do you think that there's going to be a new inflow in investors? Do you think that a lot of new retail are going to enter? When do you think that is actually going to prove to be a peak of the cycle?
Well, I think there actually might be a stat we can pull up, but I think there's a record amount of cash sitting on the sidelines. Let's just take Warren Buffett, for instance, and his fund. They've got a record amount of cash and they've been selling over the last year. And I think a lot of people are sidelined, waiting for better conditions. And you see a lot of people coming out of stocks. A lot of people have exited crypto, gone into the safe haven of gold. So I think there's a lot of money that are current investors waiting to be injected again. But also on top of that, I don't really think we ever saw a true adoption from retail this cycle compared to last. Though I think they've always been sidelined. They haven't really been too present in this cycle. So I think the combination of both later in the year can come true.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely hasn't been as many retail coming in, especially due to the fact that just a lot of people don't have the savings like they did in previous cycles when rates were lower. But at the same time, with global M2 very high, if we see rate cuts, then maybe that means that we're going to see that explosive inflow of cash. And that could be from obviously retail or institutions. But I think you made an interesting point around when you mentioned Warren Buffett, because obviously a lot of people are aware that he wasn't the biggest advocate of Bitcoin back in the day. And I think it's interesting because there's obviously a lot of institutions that are now kind of looking at what the US have done with implementing a strategic reserve. And they're now thinking, okay, how can we get a piece of the pie? And like my question to you is, do you think that a lot of big institutions or players like Warren Buffett, do you think that they're going to have to stop overlooking Bitcoin and see it more as an opportunity and an asset that's going to actually increase or present opportunity for them?
I don't think Warren Buffett will ever buy crypto. I don't want to be that guy, but he's very anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto, and he's made all his returns off compound interest over, 70 years he's been investing for, and he has no reason to invest in crypto. He's happy sitting in 6% returns in stock with massive compound interest. But in terms of institutions, 100%, I think it's clear that it's going to be adopted. You only have to look back to the biggest fund manager in the world, BlackRock, and what were they saying back in 2017, 2018? Larry Fink was calling Bitcoin a scam and for money launderers. And now he's like one of the biggest advocates for it. So I think that's clear how quickly these institutions can change. And especially when, especially if Bitcoin keeps increasing and becomes a dominant force, like what now it's ranked like 9th asset in the world, people won't sit on the sidelines for too long.
Yeah, and you mentioned Larry Fink, and he actually recently said that, the US dollar is at risk of losing its reserve status to Bitcoin. And that is a really interesting thing to say, because if that's the case, that is probably one of the biggest bullish things for Bitcoin, because it becomes a global currency of the world. And a lot of people don't think or didn't think that it would actually get to that case. But if you're having one of the biggest asset managers, the CEO, saying that the US dollar is at risk, like that's massive.
You can't ignore that. No, and I think that's because, Bitcoin is obviously not controlled by any central authority. We're seeing like the fears of inflation and the amount of debt the US have. And even if it's like pretty unlikely in the short term, just for him to put that option as Bitcoin being next in line and, being BlackRock, the biggest fund manager in the world, everybody's looking up to them and what they're saying. So I think it's one of the biggest comments made about Bitcoin in recent history.
All right, let's go away from the market for now. Everyone knows that it's not very favorable, and we're probably going to just have to wait on our hands for a little bit until things start to clear up and we get a bit more certainty around where we're going. But that also gives us an opportunity to also look at other assets that might show strength in times of uncertainty, and actually might play as a really good opportunity at this present time with the market showing a lot of fear. So I want to know from you what actual assets or digital assets you're looking at.
I was actually, funny you say that, thinking about this today I'm actually, for the first time in a while, maybe a few months, I'm very excited about the actual potential opportunities that lay ahead. So many people have left the space. So much noise has quieted down. That just leaves, opportunities for one to take advantage of that. And Jeff, actually our CEO, I remember today he asked, what are some good high risk players? And to me, a high risk player is probably around a 10x. Would you agree with that?
I mean, the high risk play is so hard to even describe in crypto, because for people it's maybe 100x or 1000x. But I think anything that you've got a good chance of losing your money in is high risk, in my opinion, which is actually probably a lot of crypto.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a 10x plus, anything above that. And if you asked me this maybe like 4 months ago, you had to really, go down the list of, maybe 500 ranked crypto to find a high risk gem. But since we've had such a big pullback, there's a lot of really established coins that I can definitely see being a 10x. One of those is actually Deepbook. We call that, went 20x, but it's come down a lot. And for it to go a 10x to here, it only takes it back to close to its all-time high.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you make a good point. There's so many coins that had down 95%. So there's obviously opportunity there. It's just a matter of which coins are going to show the same resurgence and like the same strength that we saw when the market did pick up. And yeah, Deepbook's a great one. What are your thoughts on the meme coin sector? Because in my opinion, that's just been a bit of, it's just not been exciting at all. And that was actually one of the big sectors that I was really excited about in 2024. It showed a lot of strength. It brought a lot of retail in. And I don't know. I just feel like it's just like not showing the same excitement.
Yeah, the sentiment over in meme coins is quite poor. To me, there's only one coin standing out that has any noise around it currently, any following, and that happens to be Filecoin, which had a bit of a resurgence last week, but still well below its all-time high. How do you feel about meme coin land?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I just don't think it's showing much strength. I honestly, once the market does pick up, I do expect to see a bit of a resurgence because, I don't know, everyone's got that gambling mindset about them once they make a bit of money in crypto. And to be honest, meme coins are probably the biggest gambling sector in crypto just because solely there's not really much utility behind them except for just being a part of a community and like basically a cult. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they do resurge. I think only the strongest ones will. But at the same time, it is hard to see such a big sector in 2024 becoming, one of the worst performing sectors in 2025.
Yeah, it's probably like the last thing people invest in when risk is off, but one of the first things people might invest in when risk is on. So there's two sides to that. Yeah,
definitely. So what about someone like a sector like RWA? Are you still feeling bullish around that one? Because we did mention it in our previous podcast around that we thought it would be a really strong sector. Are you still seeing it the same way?
Yeah, I am. Definitely the top projects. I've thought they will hold up a bit better than they have, but it's been across the whole market that's been down. So those coins such as Ondo, Chex, Mantra, I think they're blue chips in the space. And I think it's just going to take a bit of time for those ones. How do you feel about RWA?
Yeah, look, RWA is always going to be one that I'm bullish on just because of the talks around tokenization, Larry Fink being a big advocate for that one as well. I think it makes a lot of sense in my opinion, just because like tokenizing of financial assets, so they're more liquid, more accessible. It just makes a lot of sense. I think that we're gonna at one point in our lives be in a economy where a lot of things are tokenized. So for me, if you got a long-term horizon on RWA, then or a long-term bet on RWA, then there's a lot of good opportunities right now, especially since we've had this crash. And outside of Bitcoin, because I do think Bitcoin right now is offering a really good opportunity at its current price. I do think that outside of Bitcoin, that RWA is probably the next big one just because of the institutional interest they'll probably get. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing. And, it'll be interesting if DeFi might be next just because I know that institutional interest has been previously on DeFi as well.
Correct. I'm also picking up on the top layer ones, such as Sui and Solana. We're looking at the wallet addresses activity today, and Solana has 6x that of Ethereum. So I think that chain's still well alive, and as well as Sui. Sui's in its infancy, as it's the first cycle this time as being the top layer one. So I think those two in that sector has a lot of promise.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because a lot of people have actually been speaking about Solana and, maybe that it's not going to be performing as well now that it doesn't have meme coin frenzy and it doesn't really have many bullish catalysts on the horizon. I think it does have the ETF, obviously, but a lot of people have actually been fudding it a little bit. So, I do always look at metrics and it's really good to see that they're actually still holding out with strong user activity. Developers are still using the chain and, also Sui as well, as you said, they're both performing at actually pretty good rates in terms of user growth. So I do think at these prices as well, if a lot of people had these prices 3 months ago, they'd be laughing and obviously going to be buying as much as they can. So it's funny how people's perspective changes just after, we have a bit of a dip. So yeah, I'm more or less seeing it as good opportunities across those assets.
So let's say you want to put together a hypothetical portfolio for the next 6 months to round out 2025. You have 100K, sit on the sidelines, and you have a medium risk approach.
Okay, so to be honest, I think that I'd still allocate 50% of my portfolio to Bitcoin. I just don't see it as an asset that's going to, be as risky as other ones, just because obviously it's the biggest crypto asset, but also it just has a lot more bullish catalysts on the horizon for it. And it's obviously started to diverge from the rest of the market. So even if we do have a pullback, I don't see it pullbacking anywhere near as hard as all the other ones. So that's more of a risk, like a risk adverse position if I would to have one. Okay, so that means I got 50K left. I'd probably look at allocating maybe like 30K across Solana and Sui. I mean, I do like Ethereum, but it's just probably not the right time for it right now. I would consider potentially, to be honest, maybe I would put 30K between Sui, ETH, and Solana just because, it's hard to ignore ETH, and I think it might have a few, bullish catalysts or institutions start to adopt it soon.
10K in each?
Yeah, maybe about that, or maybe, I reckon 10K in each probably. What does that leave me with then? 20?
20.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So 20 across probably RWA and DeFi, in my opinion. I'd probably go like 10 or 5 to 10K in Ondo, or maybe like 5K Ondo, 5K Mantra. So those are both RWA plays. And then I guess the last 10K I'd be allocating to DeFi and the big DeFi plays. I'm still very bullish on Aerodrome. So Aerodrome would be one that I'd put a little bit of money in, which is a decentralized exchange on Base, and then maybe 5K in a lend and borrowing protocol.
I think right about now, all the meme coin believers have just turned off the podcast.
Exactly.
Cool. So I've got 100K to play with.
Yeah, 100K.
Cool. I'm slapping 50K right into Bitcoin, safe haven.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about Bitcoin's volatility, but you go back to November 1st, you compare gold, the stock market, and Bitcoin and their prices, and Bitcoin has increased more than any of those. So Bitcoin, my safe haven. That means I've got 50K to be pretty flexible with and to take on a bit more added risk. I'm going to stick with my layer ones, likewise with you. Definitely Solana. The user activity is still there despite the harsh conditions. And Sui. I think that's going to make a race to the top 10, and I want to be a part of that.
Awesome.
And then, thanks. And then moving on from there, I'm taking checks in RWA. I'm going down the risk curve here. I think that can bring more returns than the other two projects, Mantra and Ondo. Do I think checks is a better project right now than those two? Probably not, but I think it has a higher ceiling to catch up in terms of price movement, and it has a lot of bullishness in that project. Lastly, I'm going to get all the meme coin listeners to jump back in here, and I'm actually going to probably put 5K into Filecoin and 2.5K in a PopCat.
Oh, back on the PopCat train.
I am. I think down here at the 20 cents is a pretty good risk reward spot.
Yeah.
So how have I got? I've got 50K Bitcoin, 10 in Sui and Solana.
Yeah.
I've got 10 in checks and then 7.5 in memes. How much do I have left?
You got 12.5.
12.5.
What about, I know you're a big fan of Hype Liquid, or?
Yeah, you're on the money
thoughts?
there. Yeah, there was a bit of FUD recently with Hyperliquid.
Yeah.
But FUD can easily pass in crypto, and especially if the project learns from it and improves and attacks it in the right manner, which I do think Hyperliquid did. It was a very unique situation, But I think I'm going to put the other 12.5 into Hyperliquid, as I think that's in a great spot as well. And that could be a 3-figure coin come end of cycle.
Yeah, I think we probably forgot to mention AI tokens, because I thought 100% looking back, like I probably should get like an allocation to something like Tau. Tau is like a layer 1 blockchain integrating AI with it as well. So censorship resistant AI. That's obviously going to be a massive play in the future, because you're integrating two of the biggest or hottest sectors or market sectors right now, being AI and blockchain. So I think that would also be one to definitely look at allocating to as well.
Yes, I agree. I think that has underperformed as of recent. But I think, in my opinion, that's actually a 4-figure coin as well, with peak market conditions return. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny though, because it's like there's a lot of coins that have underperformed, and fundamentally they're very sound, and even on a metric scale, like they're doing very well. And then you have other coins, like I won't mention too many, but maybe like Cardano, which has, you know, like not many active users, not many developers, ecosystem hasn't been growing very well. You know, that token's doing very well compared to a lot of other layer 1s. And it's funny because from an analyst perspective, we're trying to find a lot of the good projects based on those factors. And, you know, it's hard to sometimes overlook the fact that, well, it's easy to sometimes overlook the fact that a lot of these tokens can be just driven by hype and communities and stuff like that as well. So, how are you finding like actually analyzing the market? Because as we've said, like it can be hard when what we find is actually not performing.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, you don't have to sugarcoat it. The ecosystem on Cardano is pretty poor. It's pretty bit of a ghost chain over there. But the factors such as the US tax, potential implications really push that the prices it went to. It is tough, especially in these conditions. So how have you found the last month in terms of analysing projects?
I think this is the thing, right? So like we've had so many tokens, you know, drop even like 30% this month, and on the metric scale, like they're actually not showing a lot of drop in activity. So like, for example, Solana, that one dropped all the way down to about $120. But if you look at active users, like it's still upwards of 9 million users, about 90 million transactions daily. So you have to look at that and you're like, okay, well, that's still there. The token price is just dropped by like 50, 60%. So is it a situation where, you know, once the market starts to pick up, it's just going to go back to the prices they were? Or is it solely driven by hype and outside noise? Because obviously the metrics aren't really lining up there. And if you look at something like, XRP, Cardano, their metrics obviously very, very low compared to Solana, but some of them have actually like increased it in times because of these bullish news articles that are coming out. So it's like, in my opinion, the crypto market is becoming a lot more reactive to news and reactive to actually outside noise, and less reactive to like actual data-driven facts, which is, making obviously things harder for us. But at the end of the day, I think that if you have a long-term approach, the sustainability and the longevity of a project is solely going to be based on their fundamentals and how they're performing. So I don't really have too much to worry about when it comes to that. I just think, the short-term reactivity of the market is obviously favoring hype and the outside noise.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. And it makes me think about how in the past, crypto was very separated to the macro environment, traditional finance, but they seem to be merging, which is good and bad at the same time. Last cycle, there was catalysts such as like NFTs that brought so much liquidity. We have, you got Justin Bieber buying punks for millions of dollars, Logan Paul etc. And you also had thousands of dollars of airdrops, which injected more liquidity. My question to you here is, what could bring about like sort of a similar level of engagement and liquidity? Like what could be a catalyst outside of macro conditions favoring outside of traditional finance? What's something internally in crypto that you might need to see or you want to see that could really kickstart something inside it?
I think truthfully, like it's a lot of people get excited by opportunity, and if opportunity is ripe, then a lot of people are going to take it by their hands and make the most out of it. So obviously with NFTs, it was a new wave of investment opportunity, new wave of technology as well, and how people could actually interact with artwork and things like that. So a lot of people saw that as, okay, there's people making millions of dollars every day buying digital art. How can I get myself involved? Because this is, in its infancy, a bubble starts to form and then a lot of excitement. And if you look at the most recent one, this is what I think would be meme coins. Obviously, that became the new phase where that brought a lot of excitement in, and that was the injection of a lot of money into the space because we had a lot of retail investing. We had the big celebrities coming back in, launching their own meme coins, and that's where the bubble starts to grow. And then again, it pops. Then liquidity, rushes into other places. So it's the ones that are going to be the most attractive and exciting sectors. So things that obviously are easy to understand, things that are showing the potential of making 10 or 100x gains within months. A lot of people will find that as being, the next, I think that's, more or less going to be the next wave of massive inflows, but it's just too hard to know where it's going to come from.
Okay, yeah. Something I like to stand by is narrative follows price. So we see price appreciation, we can start pegging narratives towards it or the reason why we're moving up. But at the end of the day, we're just moving up in price and no narrative really needs to be pegged to it. The similarities with meme coins and NFTs, I think the people already within the industry now, kind of meme coins pissed them off. But back with the NFTs, it was a bit more, it was an innovation. It actually had utility, so to speak. And so native crypto investors already within the space, wanted it to prosper. But you look towards the meme coins that have no utility and people thought it was bringing the crypto industry down. So it didn't recruit all of those already investors. It was maybe half. And some people hated it, some people loved it. But you look at the NFTs and there was really no reason to hate them. Yeah,
100%. I think look, at the end of the day, maybe the prices of those NFTs it was a bit of a joke because you had monkey photos going upwards of $1 million per
that were ridiculous.
NFT. Yeah, it's
that rock on Ethereum.
That was Ether rocks. Yeah, they were going for millions. They're still highly collected artworks, and it's okay, this is really bad art going for $1 million. It's at what point are people gonna actually start to think about what they're buying? Because it just seemed like there's a lot of people just didn't care where they were putting their money at that point. And that probably was a good indicator that we were hitting a peak of the bubble, especially when everyone's just throwing money at honestly the dumbest of NFTs or the dumbest of tokens I've ever seen. So I think next time, especially I should have seen it with the meme coins as well, but next time I see people throwing dumb money around, and especially your friends and family who don't even like crypto or don't know anything about crypto, that should be a pretty good indicator that it might be too overhyped at that point.
Yeah, probably. It's a good indicator. Celebrity is always a great indicator in terms of when we've reached a bubble. It was, the celebrities launching meme coins, they were complete scams. But you go back to the NFTs and that was celebrities launched NFTs, the Nelk Boys launched NFTs. I remember Logan Paul bought $10 million of World of Women and then he was on his podcast Impulsive just shilling it to everybody.
Yeah.
Saying, this is the future.
Yeah, and he had his own NFTs as well, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh, don't get me started on those. It's
The zoo ones, I can't remember what they're
euros,
called.
millions of dollars, I believe.
Zootopia? Oh, I actually can't remember. But yeah, that was one that, obviously a lot of investors lost a lot of money, but it's like you kind of have to trust those people because you watch their videos every day, or you feel like you personally know a celebrity. Like personally, that's what I think. Like when I'm like seeing Kanye or something, if I saw him on the side of the road, I'm like, oh, I know him. Like I actually know him. And he's like, do you know what I mean? So you have a bit of trust with that person, like automatically. So I don't know. It's bad because obviously that taints the crypto sector, but these are bad actors being celebrities. Yeah. They're not actually bad actors, but
I think Logan Paul definitely marked the top with that purchase. But I remember you also marked the top of Pokemon cards. I remember he had about 3 to 6 months where he was selling Pokemon cards to his whole audience, buying up rare collections. Pretty sure he got scammed himself. And I think Pokemon cards probably down 50% since you marked the top there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that maybe we just need to use Logan Paul as like a little indicator then.
Yeah.
Anyone who doesn't know who that is, that's like just a YouTuber, streamer, boxer,
wrestler.
Yeah. Exactly. He's a man of many talents, that guy. But he's a celebrity that gets involved with a lot of different investing and stuff like that. But
so don't take financial advice from a celebrity.
No, exactly. More or less, use that advice to probably sell your assets. Because I think that's where it becomes too overhyped, right?
Yeah. There's one more celebrity this just grinds my gears. It was KSI.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a massive Luna believer. I actually invested in Luna, but I got out before that went to zero. It went down 99% as the stablecoin depegged, and it was just crashing. And I remember KSI tweeting out, he's longing it.
Yeah.
He's putting like a $5 million long on to his community.
Yeah.
And he's just lost all that money. It's gone down as a famous story.
Well, that's the thing is he just didn't even understand why it was going down. He was just like, oh, this is FUD. But like he didn't do the research to why it was a death spiral and it was never going to come back. And it's just funny to see.
Yeah, he's definitely a counter trade now. Whatever he says, do the opposite.
Okay, cool. Let's actually go away from the celebrities for now because we spoke about gold a little bit at the start of this podcast, and I thought may as well to just touch back on it because gold's been going up crazy.
It has.
Like I think it hit $3,100 recently. We were talking about it when it just hit $3,000 for the first time, and it's like, at what point does this thing stop? Because commodities like gold don't usually jump up in price this much.
No, yeah. Nearly every day it's close to up 1%.
Yeah.
I think it's up 6 out of the last 7 days. And all of them probably close to 1%. It's quite rare. And probably that just shows off the times that we're in.
Yeah, I think like obviously everyone's going risk off, right? And then this is the safe haven, the gold standard when it comes to, inflation hedge as well. So it's funny because, obviously a lot of money is flowing out of crypto. A lot of money is flowing out of stocks, real estate. Everyone's jumping into gold. And it does get a little bit scary because it's like sometimes you got to think like, oh, who's actually like running this bullish like pump for gold? Could it actually be institutions that are all going risk off and buying gold? Or is it just retail? Like maybe people know that like something greater might be coming out of the tariffs or something greater might be coming out of, the geopolitical tension as well. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that countries are buying up gold. Probably a lot of institutions and high net worth individuals. I think it is evident that they are moving from stock to gold. So it's at an individual level as well. But do you think it could be an indicator? We'll have to see. But if Bitcoin follows gold, so potentially gold could start the rally, and then a few months down the line, Bitcoin follows.
Yeah. So like obviously Bitcoin is known as digital gold, right? And it's like a commodity. So it'll be interesting because a lot of people have for a long time spoken about this being, the inflation hedge or the safe haven in times of the like uncertainty and when things go wrong, right? And right now, gold's obviously performing in a different way to Bitcoin. There's a divergence. They're not very strongly correlated. But honestly, like the story does stick, in my opinion. Like I think that if gold is to mature a bit further, if institutions and probably once the government actually start to accumulate Bitcoin, it's going to probably tie closely to gold in the sense that it becomes one of those like safe havens. I just think it's still too volatile, still too illiquid. There's still a lot of speculation around Bitcoin for starters for it to even be classified as one of those because, yeah, gold doesn't have 30% dips in a week, right?
No. Jeez, that would cause trouble.
Exactly. So, look, as much as it's been like a store of value over the last, 10 years, because obviously it's up, 26,000% or something. You can't really call it a safe haven on a scale where it's like 3 months or like 6 months because, you can have like these massive dips where it drops 80% up from peak highs, whereas like gold doesn't just drop 80% from like 3,100, right? It wouldn't do that. So I think over the course of its life, once it matures a bit more, maybe it starts to correlate a bit more.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's now, well, the US government sees it as digital gold. And what it is it's more accessible, it's more transparent, it's a set supply. So it has a lot more pros towards it. And it's being bought up around the world. So the only thing, you can't call it a safe haven because of its price. But in terms of its characteristics, it has everything to go beyond being a safe haven.
Yeah, and that's funny because Senator Loomis, she actually reintroduced her Bitcoin Act, and me and Jeff were actually talking about like how, like I was actually saying like I think that they should potentially sell a bit of their gold to buy Bitcoin because both of them being store of values, it made sense for me to like you should diversify some of that gold to accumulate Bitcoin because you don't have to use taxpayer money, which is the whole point, right? Obviously we spoke about that and this new act's come out. She's reintroduced it. It looks like it's actually potentially going to happen if it passes. So do you think that's like a smart strategy? Do you think that Bitcoin and gold, having both of them is smart, or diversifying into gold or diversifying your gold into Bitcoin?
Yep. I don't think selling gold is probably the best option the US government can come up with. I'm sure they can find different alternatives in terms of stockpiling more Bitcoin. I think it's crucial and vital that they do buy more Bitcoin to stay ahead of the herd and still be the leading economy. But I think they should find different avenues to buy it up.
Yeah. Look, I don't know. I think that they should, like, obviously, agree to disagree here. But look, Bitcoin and gold, if they're going to have the same narrative at the end of the day, just one being, a higher beta, high up the risk curve. Look, it doesn't make too much sense to be accumulating the same asset if they're going to have that correlation in the long term. So, look, I think they just may as well just jump the gun now, sell some gold and start buying Bitcoin, because I'm worried that, look, other countries might start to buy it, or big players are going to buy. They're going to miss out on the opportunity, and then Trump's going to be like, nah, let's not buy anymore. Like, we've missed our chance. So I'm like, just get the ball rolling already.
So what, you want Australia to start buying before the US does?
Oh, look, to be honest, I don't mind. I'm happy just as long as my Bitcoin goes up, right?
Yeah, I think if there's no other option, it's definitely the right thing to do, to sell gold, to buy up Bitcoin. But I think they could come up with a way to work around it. I'm not sure right now how the majority of America would feel if Trump has decided, or it's got to go past Congress, but he's put forward, it's gone through. We're selling gold, we're buying Bitcoin, and then gold's making new highs. I'm not sure what the analyse would be from that.
I mean, like it would only be probably like 1% though, right? Like gold, their gold treasury is massive. It's like,
I'll have to go to Fort Knox first. I haven't checked it out yet and audited it.
but like even, having 1% or like 0.5% of their assets go into Bitcoin is like still will give them a massive position in Bitcoin while still like not really like affecting their gold position too much. But yeah, I guess it will be an interesting one to see how that plays out because a lot of people are kind of like hoping that they do it soon. The other way is they just keep printing money and buying it. I reckon. Someone actually said that recently. They're like, oh, the winning country is going to be the country that just prints mass capital or keeps printing money and just buys and buys and buys Bitcoin. Look, their currency probably goes to zero, right? But if they can accumulate like a shit ton of like Bitcoin, then maybe in the long term, they're the winners.
Could counteract that effect.
Yeah.
On another senator, news came out this morning that I can't remember his name, but a US senator put forward a bill for 401ks in America to start allocating to crypto, to Bitcoin. You can do it slightly. Some companies accept it. I think Fidelity does. But there's T's and C's such as you can have max 20% and your employer has to agree. So a lot of the time, it's actually impossible for Americans to do that. And you just wrote a piece on Australia and SMSFs in Bitcoin. So don't tell me maybe the effect that it could have in America and what you've seen in Australia.
Yeah, look, right. It just makes Bitcoin closer to the mature asset that we've always wanted it to be. And look, it is a mature asset, but it obviously has to still pass a few big hurdles before it's going to be mass adopted, right? And if it does pass, then I think that's it. Like everyone's now going to be buying Bitcoin. There's no reason to ignore it at this point. And there's probably going to make up a larger position of a lot of people's overall portfolio because I think it's recommended maybe 1% to 2% of your assets should be diversified in emerging markets, being like crypto or Bitcoin. So, if that's the case, and maybe we start to see a bit larger positions there. And then with Australia, I guess like with the advisory side, I think that more advisors are going to be confident enough to start to, offer Bitcoin or offer crypto as an investment opportunity for a lot of clients because it was something like 96% of Australian advisors in 2024 had their clients asking something about crypto or how to get in the crypto market. But it was only around 22% that were advising any position. So, I think that they're still worried. They're a bit scared. They don't have the knowledge currently to, make that call for their clients. But I think once we fill that knowledge gap and obviously fill them with a bit of confidence that a lot of clients are going to be, have the opportunity through their advisors to explore the crypto world.
Super important and it's super in demand. I remember being at the crypto convention in Sydney and working out of our booth. I had so many conversations from people asking, do you accept SMSFs? Do you know how to set it up? Could you put me in touch with somebody? And then that was 5 months ago. It's only increased since then. I know it is quite hard to set up and people don't know where to go, but fortunately I know we make it a pretty seamless experience for people with SMSFs to set it up and start trading crypto here, which is it's pretty hard to find. Yeah,
definitely. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are now just like, I'm just going to do it myself. So they've just set up their SMSF and I think hopefully soon we'll see a bit more confidence from the advisors though. May as well wrap this up now because it's been a good discussion and it'll be interesting to see how the market plays out in the next week. I think that, with the tariffs and stuff like that, that's going to show us a bit of, clear the way a bit for us to know where the market actually might head. Thank you for the discussion and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.